Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Hey, so we're back again. I know, what's up with you guys? You don't release podcasts in months, and then you're hitting us with two. Well, if you like the last one with Sean, and I got to mention Sean. He did the intro. Haven't heard from him in a week, so I don't have any updates on him. So, for those that don't know, Sean is the guy that you hear just before us, and he's still married as far as I know. So if you liked last week's interview with Sean, we got two really interesting designers with us. And one of them I met in real life, but I'm going to hit up Joe. It's Chacon, right?
Yep.
And then Evan Yoak. We're going to talk about Decisive Action today. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us on.
Yep, great.
I mean, what else would we be doing on a Friday night, right? So,
Talking about war games.
Yeah. I was just playing, something. So, the game, it's called Scramble Battle Britain's not out yet, and it's pretty neat to see it. So, we're going to talk about Decisive Actions coming out from GMT. I know I'm on the list, and I'm going to apologize. Never start a podcast off with an apology. I signed up to be one of your play testers, and I've read everything about the game. With life, I haven't been all that busy. But if you still need somebody to play something, I'll play test, because we've talked about this game at work. But Joe, I'm going to start with you. How long have you been hobby gaming? Tell us a little bit about your background, and mention that first game that you played that you knew you were going to be a lifelong gamer.
I think when I must have been maybe 10 or 11, and I went on a family trip out to visit a cousin of mine, or cousins in California. I'm from New Mexico, and so the family took a trip out there. We were visiting them, and my cousin pulled me into his bedroom, as the kids and everybody breaks up. He pulls out Blitzkrieg. And he says, "Hey, you need to play this with me." And he's my cousin Ken is about 3 years older than me, I think. And so we sat down and he taught me. And we played Blitzkrieg, and I was sold after that.
The Avalon Hill game.
Oh yeah, that led me to really I talked about it in some other places. The first game that I bought myself was Mech War 77 from SPI.
Oh yeah,
I saw an ad in a military modeler magazine, and I don't know how I saved up the money, and I ordered it, and I got it, and I can't believe now that at the age of 12 I read the rules, and I pretty much understood them and was able to play, and after that it just snowballed to my room that I'm in now, where I design and I play, that's overrun with games.
Yeah, I think we all got that problem. Do you still have Mech War in your collection?
Oh yeah, I do. Most definitely. That game really influenced me a lot. The idea of platoon level combat, and back then, the mid '70s, and that led to Firefight and Mech War 2 and some other things. So that when I was deciding what I wanted to do for my future, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an armored cav platoon leader in the Fulda Gap, and that it's kind of what I went on to try and achieve. Didn't make it there exactly, but close.
Oh, I didn't know you were Cav. We have a rule: we can't let Cav people on. That's why Kurt Hudson hasn't been on this show ever. I'm sure you know Kurt. It's interesting. I was leaving work at Andrews to come here and to home, and I go, "How does cavalry work on the modern battlefield?" I live 45 minutes from Andrews, and Kurt didn't stop talking, and I had to take the last 15 minutes in my driveway, and the dogs are looking at me like it's got to be a drug deal. And Evan, not an armored cavalryman, but tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I don't have any exciting armored cavalry stories, unfortunately.
Right.
No, I've Decisive Action is actually my first game to work as a developer. But since then, I've started as staff developer at GMT, so I've worked on all sorts of stuff. Not so much crunchy hex and counter games, but more coin related, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and I mean, Decisive Action has actually been the most fun game to work on thus far.
So you're trying to say working with Volko and Stephen Gossis and those guys just isn't that much fun?
I've never
Okay.
talked to Volko, unfortunately, but one of these days.
Yeah, he lives a half hour away. He got me into a game a few years ago. We used to go to his house and play called Angola, and if you haven't played it, you should. So, Decisive Action, Joe. Is this your first game as a designer?
Oh, no. I've actually been designing. Gosh, now I was. It's funny. I've had to look back at some old files for some stuff. I published several games with Multiman Publishing. This is my first game with GMT. To come to publication with them. So yeah, I did a lot of work on the MMP Grand Tactical Series GTS games.
I know. I
Crete.
have one of them in the house.
Yeah.
Um,
The first one I did was Crete, and then I did Race for Bastogne, and I did a small kind of intro game for them called Strike Counter Strike, a small battle in the Saarland region, and I also at some point in that whole chain of designing needed to take a break from GTS and wanted to play a tactical Vietnam game and couldn't find one at the time, so I designed Front Towards Enemy, which is a fire team level
yeah,
tactical Vietnam game.
I'm staring right at it. It was a setup question. Yeah, I mean, it's not that I researched you, but Board Game Geek does work. I have a Gold Juno sword in Grand Tactical, and I'm going to tell you something. I have not punched Front Towards Enemy. I got it on one of the latest sales, but I definitely want to play it because I find those games interesting. So with tactical games, let's talk about Decisive Action. That's a pretty tactical game.
It is. It is. What led me to Decisive Action was really the experience that I had. I mentioned I was a cavalryman. That worked from like my first four years in the army, and
Yep.
I loved what I did. Being a scout platoon leader with an armored cat platoon, running around Fort Hood and Europe and doing that kind of stuff. And then I got moved out of that cool job as a scout platoon leader to be the support platoon leader. That job is where you take care of all the logistics. In my case, for the CAV squadron. That was really the first time I started working outside of a small unit, my platoon and the CAV troop. And now I had to work with guys at the brigade level and division. And I looked around and I saw that a lot of these staff officers, they were all armor officers or cavalry officers or infantry officers. And I came to the realization that the time in a 20-year career in the Army that you can actually spend in a tank turret, if you're an armor guy or a cavalry guy, is really maybe 7 or 8 years if you're lucky. If you get to be a battalion S3 and if you get to be a battalion commander. And so
Yeah.
I wanted something that was going to keep me interested in what I was doing in the Army because I enjoyed it a lot. So I actually transferred at that point is when I finished that job to military intelligence. I wanted to do MI work, and I envisioned that I was going to go sit in a super secret facility. I was going to read top secret stuff all the time, and I was going to do really high level analysis and that kind of big strategic intel. I spent my whole career at the tactical level. I was a battalion S2, division analysis chief, brigade S2, corps operations, intel operations officer, land component command at NATO. Everything I did was kind of at the tactical level or below as an intel officer. So I got tons and tons of tactical experience, from the lowest level up to really land component command.
I'll tell you what, it's the thing about the military. We'll whine about it. 12 years of having fun, operations. And then the next 18, they made me a loggy. But that's where I learned how the whole system works.
You do.
So,
You kind of expand things. For me,
yeah.
the really eye-opening job I had as an intel officer is when I went to Homefels, Germany, and I became at the time they called it an observer controller, an observer trainer, and
Yeah.
I spent 2 years following around a battalion staff, particularly the intel section, as they went through and they planned and they executed operations. I think I saw 18 different battalions come through, and there's some training involved, helping them to learn, and watching them do force on force, for 10 days in the box or 2 weeks in the box against other units. You learn a lot. What I learned there, which really led me to decisive action, was when you're a platoon leader, yeah, hey, you've got you and 4 or 6 vehicles if you're lucky that you worry about. And even when you're a company commander, you might have an XO that helps you out, and a first sergeant that takes care of logistics, and it's you and your 3 platoons, and you're talking to platoon leaders and you're fighting your platoons. When you go to the battalion level, that's when combat gets really complicated, because now you can't do that with just those handful of people. You've got a battalion commander, you've got an S3 operations officer to run that. He's got an S3 air guy who's coordinating all the air. You have a whole fire support team. It's not just one guy or a JFO. You've got TAC-Ps out there now helping you with the air. A whole intel section, air defense gets assigned to you, engineers. That to me was the point in command, the tactical level, where combat gets super complicated. And that's kind of what I saw as an OC, and what led me to want to incorporate that kind of complexity into something that players can see and feel in decisive action.
Yeah, I just like yourself, I talk to a ton of gamers, and a lot of them are like, and I don't know if you guys, I hate talking about crazy things on social media, but there was a thing about the reality of certain war games, and I found it was interesting because it's like, if somebody were to actually make a game that was realistic, you wouldn't want to play it, and I got some of those in my house. But when this game came out, I because I think we're friends on Facebook too, that it was one guy put in the comment, game is great because I love being on battalion staff. And I'm thinking, said no one ever. Because it's hard.
It is when you watch all these guys go through this over and over again, you learn a lot. So what I hope with decisive action is that I pulled out the key points that go into it. One of the things that I've always thought, gamers, good gamers, particularly if you like tactical games like me, when you look at a map to set up a defense or to plan an attack for a scenario, regardless of what it is, you're kind of going through those steps that a whole battalion staff goes through in a kind of an abbreviated mental process. What are the avenues that the enemy's going to come at? Where can I set up a defense to stop them? How am I going to allocate my forces to do that? I think gamers do that naturally because of what we do to play and win the game, especially good ones. And so I just wanted to feed on that in decisive action by adding the layer on that we did for controlling the assets, so that you really focus a little bit more on how am I going to bring all the things that I have to bear to kill the enemy when I want to. And that's really kind of the theme with decisive action, is your asset controlled and the things that are outside of your unit that you need to ask for to bring in that allow you to do that. So hopefully with decisive action, it's got all the basic game stuff, moving on hexes, fires, and the way we do the fires is a little unique. Take casualties, all that shoot and move stuff that you do in a normal game is there. That I hope it's not too complicated. And we just kind of added that layer for asset control that kind of sets you up to kind of see the battlefield like a battalion commander and a staff do when they're planning out and fighting it.
So I can say, folks, you got it here first. Joe and Evan are going to teach everybody MDMP and MET-TC. Sorry, Evan.
No, I was going to jump in and add. Yeah, I mean, I think Joe's done a really good job of including the staff part, but abstracting it out. So you're not doing you as the player aren't doing a lot of the the boring battalion S3 work or whatever, a lot of that's abstracted through the command point system and the operations points. So it keeps the game on the game side and not too onerous if your friend on Facebook felt that was going to be the case.
Yeah, which was a question I was going to ask you guys, right? Like, for me personally, I have some very thick rule books here, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm probably never going to play most of them because I want to have fun. I want to roll dice. I want to get a game I'm going to get right into. Yet I still played Littoral Commander. Go figure. That what was the reception like when you guys first started talking to GMT about this? Like, whoa, this is real. This is the real deal here.
I'm forgetting now. Maybe it was 2 years ago, I guess, that I believe in kind of having. I won't say a finished product, but when I took it to GMT, I had all my own concept artwork done. I had counters printed. I had cards, because we do use some cards in there for some really informational things, all done. And I took it to Gene and I showed it to him. And one of the things he said is they were excited to have a hex encounter game to put into their schedule because knowing where they came from and the kind of games that are very popular and they're publishing now, they wanted to stay kind of true to that hex encounter, and they were very appreciative to have something like that, and even something that wasn't so simple, but something that had some meat on it that guys could jump into. So I don't know the rule book. I haven't looked at it, and I have no idea what the layout's going to be. It might be at 30 pages right now, but
30,
the first
32.
32, I think the first 8 or 9 are.
I'm sorry.
Okay, the first 10 or so are descriptive. It's the components, and I put in a lot of illustrations in there. One of the things that we've talked about, it's one of my pet peeves is when I read the rule book, I want to be able to read the rule book, and I don't want to have to go get the player aid chart, because if I see something that refers to a table, I kind of want to look at it and get an idea what the table's like. So those are in the rule book as well, so you can see them while you're reading the rule book. So there's probably a little bit of extra space in the rule book maybe that we could get rid of if we wanted to make it a little bit shorter. But I think the basic rules are like 8 pages, and then the advanced rules are maybe another 10. And the rest of it is description or optional rules.
Yeah, the rules are really descriptive. Looking through it, and I'll tell you, when I first downloaded the rules, because I'm using the ones I have open is the most recent, and I'm like just looking at the table of contents, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be just like staff work, but from reading the rules and going through it, that it's actually it the way you describe it just really kind of makes sense. And I found that very interesting. And then with the pictures, everything, because I'm not that smart, so I like pictures. One thing I noticed right away is that your counters don't look like a lot of other counters for a lot of other games.
No.
Yeah.
The only information on the counters is the number of vehicles or squads, shown by icons or, silhouettes. In my case, I like the overhead view that we have. Some tactical type symbols and like the unit name, the type of unit it is. All the pertinent data that you need for it, though, the attack strength, the defense strength, the movement, and there's multiple ways to attack, the different firepowers, as we call them. They're all on a card that you kind of keep off to the side that you can reference. Depending on how you play, what I found when I was playing with Matt, when we'd go to do an engagement, it's almost like he'd pull the card for an M1 tank, and I'd lay it on the table like I was playing the card so he can see the values, and I'm shooting at his T90 tanks, and he pulls out his T90 card and lays it on the table, and we compare the values and, look at the mods and roll the dice.
A question from looking at I was going to ask was, by any chance, are you a miniatures gamer?
I'm not. I've always loved it. I've dabbled in it some. Some of the early gaming I did back at Fort Hood in the in the late 80s was with a bunch of miniatures guys, because that's all we had. But it's funny that you say that. You're the first one who's pointed that out, but it does kind of give you a miniatures feel to see those top-down view of the vehicles and the infantry icons on the map. That's really what I was going for in some respects.
Yeah, it almost looks like you're at the top and you're doing some planning. But right away when I looked at it, I'm like, oh, I wonder if this could be made into, because I saw it with the unit cards, because okay, this is the combat values of aircraft. Look at me, of tank X, platoon this, and there is some stat tracking that players have to do. But I'm like, wow, this is almost like, I wonder if this guy's a miniatures gamer. So I finally got to ask that question. So far in play testing, what have people said? I feel bad I did not get a chance to play the game at Connections, but a lot of people played it, really liked it. And maybe because it was Evan, was very charming. But let's start with
Undoubtedly.
Evan.
Yeah, I'll let Evan answer that, because he's kind of, as the developer, kind of wrangled the playtesting for us.
No, the playtest response so far has been quite positive, and lots of just questions, clarifications, but no kind of major like this doesn't make any sense or this needs to be changed. There was some of that with some of the way that the air defense is handled and with UAVs, but I think for the most part, people kind of are like, okay, yeah, this is the game, and they just want to understand how to play it, and they've enjoyed playing it.
Yeah, I would, once again, don't want to reveal any secrets, but I know some folks from Army War College, the Conflict Studies Lab, got a turn at it, and I heard that they were pretty impressed with it, because that's a tough crowd. Because you worked on a game with a former armor officer. There must have been 15 of them in that room that night. And I heard great things. So did anybody say, yeah, this game really scratches an itch that we need?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I hadn't heard about that, but one of our playtesters, and actually some really valuable feedback on some different things, is actually an instructor out at the Army Military Intelligence School, and he's been using playtest copies to teach at the military intelligence officer transition course. In the Army, they're taking armor and infantry officers and some of the other branches, and they're telling them, okay, congratulations, you've been promoted to captain. You're now an MI officer. Go to Fort Chacon and learn how to be an MI officer. And he's using the game to help them understand, what they need to know at that battalion level of command. When they go to be a battalion S2, how do they fit into the staff, and how does the whole staff operate on the battlefield to kind of put all this together? So his name is Leo Barron. I hope he doesn't mind me using his name. He wrote an article for us in Inside GMT. He's a pretty well-known author. He's got several books out, 4 or 5 books. One called Oplan Fulda, a 1989 World War III book, and another one that I actually, when I did the Bastogne game, I didn't know him, and I used his book as one of my references when I put together a scenario called No Silent Night on the Christmas attack that they had on Bastogne, the last attack that the Germans really made on it. Anyway, he's using that. He's using Decisive Action, and they're officially incorporated into the curriculum for the transition course to help teach new MI officers how this all works at a battalion level when you put it all together and fight that complicated fight.
They're not the only place that has used it, because I had a copy of the rules. We looked at it for an upcoming game that we may revisit. So we may have another conversation in a few weeks, gentlemen. But we saw some really interesting things there of what you gamify in the game that is just not gamified in other games. And it's the planning. If you guys could, I know that you've played it a million times. Take us through like kind of what a turn feels like for a player.
Evan, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So what a turn looks like for a player. Okay, so you're gonna start drawing cards from. You have a. So the game works on activations, like as if it were a chip pull, except you have cards, and the cards give you a menu of options, which are basically a very simple order system. So whether you can shoot, whether you can move, whether you can move and shoot, you can always rally. And then, so yeah, you flip over the top card of the deck, and then that's going to tell the formation and that's activated. And then you go unit by unit within the formation in any order you want, and then you carry out your orders, shooting, moving, etc. And and then certain of the cards will be for independence, either brigade independence or battalion independence, or yeah, exactly, for battalion independence for the Russians as well, for the BTGs. And then those cards will let you move, obviously, the independent units, but then you can also use, that's when you can play your assets. So your things like combat air support, helicopters, UAVs, etc., all the goodies. So that's when those come out, and those come out in different ways. So for the US player gets just a single independent card, which activates all of the different sorts of assets and independent units, and that's very convenient because then you can sequence and coordinate those a lot better. And the Russians have their independence and assets spread throughout different cards, so then they'll have a little bit of a more difficult time sequencing and coordinating.
And that's because the differences in C2 and you know doctrine, theory, conops.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also
Between, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then the Russians are also, they have up to an entire brigade, whereas the U.S. just has at most one. The U.S. always has one battalion in the main missions. And then yeah, so I mean, a lot of it plays like a hex and counter game, except that you have to be very, very, very careful. Decisive Action is not a forgiving game, and it's easy to make mistakes and be like, oh, why did I move that unit there? And one other aspect that I really appreciate about the game, I know Matt Kelly, one of our play testers, our lead play tester, who's an armor officer as well. He he really likes this rule that so your own units block line of sight, so you can't, not literally, but you can't shoot through your own units. And so you have to keep track of basically fire lanes in a very abstract way. And yeah, that rule has come back to haunt me many times. I merrily send guys off to only to realize that they're blocking everybody else who needs to be covering fire from behind them.
Yeah, from reading the rules, it's when I said planning, I should have really kind of prefaced it. It's really thinking. It's those, little decisions a player has to make in the game, because I did watch some folks playing it, and I saw that, damn, I should have done that. But I like the combination of, you need to have a plan for the turn, but you have a chaotic activation system. You don't know what's going to pop up first, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. When you talk about planning, one of the components of it is, everything you have. If you focus on, as Evan said, the U.S. side, almost always you have a combined arms battalion. In this case, hopefully this is the first game of many, but this is an U.S. Army combined arms battalion. So you'll have one mech company. Those are the formations you activate. A mech company and two armor, or an armor and two mech companies. And then we add in a coalition partner company because we don't fight alone, and it gives a little bit more combat power for the U.S. forces. Those are the formations get activated. And then you have the normal things like battalion mortars. You may have air defense and engineers attached. That's kind of like your whole force. So in order to defeat the enemy, you need more than that. And so before the game, you have a stack of assets that are available. That's kind of the things that belong to brigade and division, that as a battalion commander in your plan, they'll either tell you can use and plan for, or you can go ask for. Things like close air support, attack helicopters, reinforcing artillery fires, counter battery missions that you want, fast cam, artillery delivered minefields. All those kinds of things are assets. And you have a stack of those that the division says, this is what we have to play with, or the brigade has, this is what we have to fight with today. And from that, you decide what you want to use in your battle. But you can't get everything you want. Evan talked about these operations points. That's kind of like your staff bandwidth to plan and implement and use these things. So once you start spending those things to buy assets, they go down and you can only get so many. So once you have the assets that are allocated to your unit, your battalion, then you decide, when do I want those assets to show up on the battlefield? You kind of have to look at the map. Like I said, a good gamer probably does anyway, and he looks at the avenues of approach and where he wants to kill the enemy. Now you add in a little time-based plan and thinking, okay, if he starts at the map edge, it's going to take him 4 turns to get to my engagement area where I want to kill him. So I want my cast to come in on turn 4. And that's the pre-planning that you do. So that when you get to turn 4, your cast shows up and your attack helicopters. Or if you're worried about him breaking through by turn 7, that's when you have your artillery delivered minefield available. So you plan those things out. Those things you can hold on to and have them on call, but it takes a little bit more to get them into the game. It takes more of those operation points, that staff bandwidth while they're fighting the fight to try and get more assets in. That's the planning aspect, I think, that really comes out in decisive action.
Yeah, and that's, you guys, all the questions set up another question, of course. But one of the things from talking to gamers is, like last week we were talking, gamers don't like cards that tell you what you can do and can't do and when you can do it. Well, that's life. That's how it works. But looking at the rules of the game, seeing how it's played, it kind of puts you into that battalion commander fight. But in some ways, yes, it's an army battalion that you're playing with, but it shows all the joint effects that affect that battalion commander's fight. EW, air, on-call artillery, which is some other guy's battalion battery, pretty far away. I thought that was interesting, and it was kind of like the setup for the question of what have people thought, because this game is a little different, and we know the wargame community loves change. That was totally sarcastic, right? It is. I don't think it's a risk, but I'm one guy that likes odd things. But it's interesting as you've play tested and you've had a lot of armor officers, and I got to tell you, Evan, will probably agree. Playing with guys that did it at one time or another, or designing, is the worst, right?
Evan will tell you yes, because he's had to work with me for the last year. So,
Oh, Joe, it's all been great. It's all been easy the whole time. No, but I would say, in terms of players feeling straitjacketed, I think how decisive action manages that is that there's very few things where you simply say, okay, you cannot do X. Usually you can do X. If you want to hold that cast asset in reserve, you can do that. But like Joe said, it just takes a little bit more operations points. So you're paying a cost to retain that flexibility. Likewise, if you decide, there's no strict orders that you can't move, a formation, a company across the map. You decided you attacked in the south and you decided, no, now I want to attack in the north. Well, another game might say, okay, well, no, you just can't do that. But decisive action lets you do that. It's going to come at a pretty high cost because you might have to either in time, you have to wait for those units to make it their way all the way back around, or which is in the case in other games. But the way decisive action handles movement, it tends to shifting your approach tends to be a little more time consuming than in some other games. And then also in terms of, if we talked about the activation cards and the orders that you can do with them. So if, for example, the Russians, they have a card that lets them move and rally. They have a card that lets them fire maneuver, which is basically move and shoot or rally, and that card that lets them just fire, and that's it with better, more effective fire. And so if the Russians get to the fire card or even the fire maneuver card, if they want to get their full movement and then go all the way back around the map, it's going to cost them extra operations points to do that. So the game doesn't force players to play a certain way, but you get penalized if you play suboptimally or if you don't plan ahead.
Yeah, the game seems very unforgiving.
But in a fun way.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything about being fun. I said it's unforgiving, which is truer than a lot of other games end up representing. Because you can't do everything you want to do. The modern battlefield's lethal. It's multi-domain. There's a lot going on, and I think you guys captured it. And when I first met Evan and we were talking, and who hooked us up? Jim Sterrett, right? James Sterrett. Is it James?
I think either one works. James, Jim.
No, he does not like Jim.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And he listens, and I will get an email on this. If he doesn't listen, Mike Dunn listens, and he's like, he
Sorry,
did it
James.
again. He did it again. And yeah, I'll tell you the story of Jim Sterrett at my house sometime too. He's looking at I'll tell it now. He's looking at my game collection. I go, it's not the complete strategist, dude. So anyway, but from talking to you, the fact that you're working with these guys and they were probably laying out terms you just never heard of before, and like guys, were you the voice of keeping it grounded into a game, not a what can I say? An MDMP guy's wet dream.
No, no. Honestly, no. I mean, when I got my hands on the game, as Joe said, it was 80%, 90% done. I mean, maybe more, probably more. I guess it's hard to measure that sort of thing. But no. I mean, now there wasn't. Joe wasn't, talking about, MET-TC or MDMP or I don't know, any other of the 1,000 acronyms that are out there. So no, the game is very approachable. You don't have to be a former cavalry officer to follow it.
Oh, come on, man.
That's a good concern. I'll tell you that I mentioned Mech War 77, things like Firefight. When I started to approach this, I went back and I pulled out a lot of the older games like Mech War 2 that I think Mark Herman did, Assault, because I have all Air and Armor, all of those great tactical games that we had in the 80s and early 90s, I guess now.
Yeah.
And I looked at them. Decisive Action by intent is, I don't think it's as complicated as like Mech War 2 was, that I was trying to consume when I was in high school and maybe in college when it came out. I'd have to go back and look at the publication dates. And I think, we did some unique things with the combat system. There's not really an odds table or anything like that. We haven't mentioned it, but the game has 20-sided dice. And for every vehicle or squad that shoots out of a platoon, so a counter is generally each counter is a platoon. You have four M1 tanks firing out of that. You're rolling 4 20-sided dice, and you've got basically a PK number, a probability hit, probability kill that we've translated into 5 percentages. It'll give you, you might need a 12 or less to get a hit. You roll 4 dice and you get, 4 10s, you got 4 hits. So the game feel and the movement, the chucking dice, all that is still there, and I think that helps to keep the game moving quickly and make it fun.
Yeah, that was something else I was going to bring up as 20-sided dice. A lot of game companies are just really hesitant about that because of just the market appeal. And I'm like, it's a 20-sided die. It's not a live hand grenade you're shipping to everybody. But when go ahead.
What I was gonna say is between us here and everybody that listens, I guess I like it because when I designed the game, I could easily break down my probability hit, probability kills into 5% increments. So I knew what they were, and you add the modifiers on there. So I said a 20-sided die is perfect for that. I found them kind of rolly. So I actually designed a little cardboard dice tower. And I tried to get GMT. I'm like, hey, let's put one of these in each game box, so everybody has their own little dice tower to roll in. But I haven't got Gene to go for that yet. But I'll try again. Still, I'm not done. I'm not done with that.
I'll tell you what. I'll send you some good STLs for that. And you talk about. Look, I'm one of my postgraduate degrees is in ops research, so I love numbers and statistics. And I really thought I would not hear PKPH tonight, but anyway, that I heard it all week. Want to get away from it. The Littoral Commander actually initially had 16-sided die, and looking at the probabilities we wanted to represent in the game, it just is better than using a D1 through 6. And once again, it goes to the emotional fungibility of gamers.
That's a great phrase.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'm self-loathing. I don't know, but it's like, well, what do you mean by there's no D6s? I got 1 million D6s in my house. Well, dude, game comes with dice.
Yep.
I thought that was interesting too, because not a lot of games use that. And it's interesting what games do, a lot of modern ones. And mathematically, I don't want to geek out here. And especially since, Joe, you weren't an ORSA, an FA-59, because then we could geek out. That I think it works, because when you look at I think it makes it a cleaner, more simpler combat resolution step in the game. Is that one of the bigger reasons?
That was exactly my goal, and to do it in a way that it's still easy. I mean, chucking a 20-sided die or several of them, and you need a 9 or less to hit. That it's not hard to visualize that, but I can still put all the mechanics behind it. Hey, I'll tell you, I wasn't what'd you say, an Orsa was a 59?
49.
49? Yeah, I wasn't one of those, but I was a 27, I think, modeling and sim guy.
Oh, you were 57.
57. You're right. I'm sorry, 57. Yeah, at the very end of my career, the Army found fit to send me to Naval Postgraduate School to get to work on modeling and simulation, to work in modeling and simulation.
And did you take Jeff Applegate's course?
It's funny. I was looking through some of that stuff. I got some notes here for tonight. I'm sure you don't want to talk about naturalistic decision makings and discrete time simulations and all that other kind of stuff.
You have no idea how much I love talking about that. To hell with Evan trying to get a job with us. You're the kind of guy where you have to hire. Actually, we just got a brand new captain in my office. He's our first M&S officer, and he took Applegate's course. And here he is. He's working for Wargaming, and he's a real quiet guy. And I know he won't listen to this. And it's like trying to explain to him with the M&S section, like, wait, hold on. I thought these guys just like throwing dice. What's all this math? Like, I thought I was going to be the math expert here. And he's equivalent of an FA-57. Anybody doesn't know that, it's an Army modeling and simulations officer. So great job if you can get it. But yeah, there is something about the larger die, and they're like, well, if you need a 9, why don't you just make it? You need on the D6 a 3 up. It's not the same, and I'm not going. You and I could go into the math on this for hours.
Do people really have that serious of a problem with D20s? This is news to me.
Oh, really? Do they have in board gaming? I would say a little bit, because I know from other games, like the one I previously mentioned, D16, it's bullshit. And I'm like, okay, we could beat up on our community, right? Gamers are used to a certain thing. I mean, I'm going to say Joe and I have been playing for what, 30, 40 years?
Yep.
And the games that he mentioned, there was that Avalon Hill SPI where they were all D6 games. I still remember what was the first game where you rolled two D6s? And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, that's crazy. I got to do all that public math. And but even now, if you look at Board Game Geek, which it's online, you know, just like everything else now, and it's usually who's ever the loudest or complainiest, whiniest. All right, I'll stop. But they'll bash it, and without ever playing the game. I don't like that. And that's the thing about dice, man. I mean, they come in all different shapes and sizes. On my
Yep.
desk, I have it's this little black velvet bag, and it says Ultimate Adjudicator, and it's a D100 because you know when people come to a work war game, they go, if I see somebody rolling dice, I'm going to freak out. But a lot of times, it's like, so what's the probability of kill here? Give me a percentage. And then I rolled a 100-sided die, and I go, well, you understand I could do that in Excel. We like rolling dice. There's just the heft, the weight of it. I don't know. Turn some of us on there, Evan.
I think you talked about a little bit of risk, and maybe this is a little bit of evolution. I'm excited to see it with 20-sided dice out there. I think that it could be a next step, and maybe more people will see the utility of it. That you can get a little bit more refinement in what you're doing. At least in this case, I looked at using like 2d10s. Then if you have 4 vehicles firing, you got to roll it 4 times. It's
Yeah.
too much. Just roll 4 20-sided. It's close enough.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it works out. I'm excited for it though. Maybe it's a little bit of evolution that we're putting into wargaming. Holy cow!
It's about time, don't you think? And,
Well, I think.
that's. Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
Oh no, I was going to add. I mean, for a long time, I actually liked having 2d6 or whatever, so that there was a some sort of a curve because it makes the results more predictable. But then I've kind of come to realize that, especially for something like warfare, and especially modern warfare, having that greater, I don't want to say randomness. People will freak out if I say randomness. That greater stochasticity, let's go with that, is actually an advantage, and just makes it much more uncertain. It makes talking about planning, it kind of, your best laid plans get ruined because you rolled well, or because your opponent rolled well, or you rolled poorly. And having some of that in there and not making it so predictable, I think is good. I mean, obviously, if you have a game where you only roll the dice 10 times, then that's not good. You don't want to have that much unpredictability, because then it'll just be boring. It'll just be a crapshoot. But most war games, and Decisive Action is no exception, there's plenty of rolls over the course of a game where they're all going to get evened out. There's basically never a critical roll where there's one roll and I just made that out of. I mean, gamers think that here we can go crap on our community and how they don't understand statistics, but it's very rare that happens. So where there's that one roll that really matters, it balances out over the course of a game, and I think having kind of the greater variability. There we go. To not say randomness. The greater variability in results, I think, is a good thing in the context of a war game.
Yeah, and I think you just coined the term stochasticity.
I promise it's a word. Well, maybe not. I don't know, but if it should be if it isn't.
It's stochastic. I like it though. I'm going to use it, and we'll see if I get caught. You could say, fluffiness. There's so many different words for it, but yeah, Joe, I could talk about this for hours, but I really want to talk about Decisive Action. We're just gonna have to keep talking afterwards. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things within the game. When you guys were creating it, I know Evan, it was pretty much created, which is, by the way, any game designer out there, when you pitch it to a company, 80% to 90% is you have to. What was the hardest thing that you guys felt that the game had to have and you had to gamify? And what was the one thing you knew the game just had to have and you weren't going to take no for an answer?
Well,
That's
I'll
rough
jump
one.
in real quick. I mean, I would love to say that I was a major part of the creation, but Joe's definitely a designer. I'm just the guy who edits and makes sure that things sound right, and I throw out some ideas, but it's this is Joe's baby, so I don't want to take credit where it's not due.
What do you
Um,
mean? At Connections, you told everybody you designed it.
I no, you told everyone I designed it, and I just hid my face in shame at the line. No,
Well, and what was the advice? If they don't like it, then you say, really, Joe did it, but okay.
yeah, exactly. Oh, you like this game? Oh, yeah, had a great part in the design process. No, you didn't like the game? No, I had nothing to do with it. No, but seriously, so I mean, I would say that from my perspective, the kind of the biggest thing that that we grappled with was the dealing with air defense in general, and then air defense against UAVs in particular. And even though it kind of Joe came to a kind of a design for effects way of handling it. The effect you get is really nice. I like how that ended up turning. I was skeptical at first, I won't lie, but the way it ended up, it feels very much like it should. You're very scared of UAVs because they're going to call in artillery on your guys. So you're constantly making sure that everyone's under the cover of within range, the sighting range of UAVs, of your air defense units, and all that stuff. So it worked out well.
Air defense is hard.
It is. Maybe this is one of the, I don't want to say pet peeves, but one of the observations that I brought out, I hope that comes out in this. A lot of gamers, I think, when they have air defense assets, they automatically want to put them up there, protecting their tanks and in the front line and the maneuver stuff. That's not your vulnerable killers. You need to have them back protecting your artillery, your mortars,
Right.
and your TOC. And I think especially with the UAVs, gamers are going to learn that very quickly if they don't already realize it. When you have air defense assets, don't worry about the tanks. They've got armor. They'll do okay. You want those you want to keep those UAVs off of your artillery, and your TOCs and those kinds of things. That's the effect I'm going for in the mechanics of the game. As Evan said, I hope they work well to kind of lead you to that.
Yeah, I mean, because it's right away, it's, not only are we teaching gamers METTC, MDMP, we're teaching them cows and dowels, I mean, this is a very educational game. But yeah, I mean, people put them forward all the time, but you got to look at, you already know what the enemy's kill chain is with those things. You don't want you want to protect so you can protect your kill chain, which is sometimes well rear of that forward line of troops.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's to me, this game kind of hits that. Well, this is from a battalion commander's perspective. This is how war works, and it kind of makes like a really interesting, like the difference of this game to me is kind of the interest I have in it. Because this is a game that, looking at the rules and yeah, this is kind of interesting. And then how you layer in some of those effects that, we're talking about the kinetic ones. You also have non-kinetic ones in there too. All of these things affect the battle space of the battalion that are so important. It's not tank on tank kills. And it looks like, as you guys were designing it, that's the feel you wanted the players to have.
That's our hope, and we tried to hit all the battlefield operating systems, as they pertain to a battalion. The one that I was concerned with, outright or overtly, that was weak is logistics and those things. But in working with Evan, and there's some really subtle things that are designed for effect that really go towards and talk about logistics a little bit, at least in the frame of decisive action. We're not talking, this isn't a campaign you're fighting, really. It's not, well, there is a campaign game. We can talk about that later and how that's implemented. But it's, you're talking 2 or 3 hours of, intense engagement, just like you'd see if you were leading a battalion at the NTC or at 29 Palms or something like that. So the battlefield logistics had to be wired into it so that you kind of got a little bit of that effect, and the asymmetry between what we consider U.S. logistics capability and Russian logistics capability. And I hope that that comes out in the way that we've addressed it in the game.
Yeah, and looking at the professional defense space, folks will always come, and I was telling Evan, we just finished our tactical logistics game this whole week, just ended today, and trying to get that balance between how logistics feeds your kinetic ability and even non-kinetic ability, because without log, you can't shoot, you can't move. And a lot of gamers try to put that in, like, the game's got a logistics, man. And I still remember talking to a gamer, and he said, "Can I talk to you on Discord?" Sure, no problem. I want to put logistics in my game. Yeah, well, you said the game's like 98% done. How do you know you don't have it in there already? Well, because I know I didn't put it in. I go, your units have movement values, right? Yeah. What do you think that's based on? And you have a fog of war thing, or where units don't move or play in a certain turn. You don't explain why that happens. If you don't have ammo, you don't shoot. And just trying to get to that feel, and especially at the battalion level. A battalion usually doesn't attack, if in most cases, unless they know they have their logistics demand could be met during the fight.
Right, right.
But how you put it in there as, hey, it's almost like you sneak it in.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is
and I think that's what I've tried to do. One of the aspects we haven't talked about is there isn't an event card or an event deck that each side has that you draw. You draw an event card every turn, and you hold it, and you get to play it at a certain point in your turn. And I intentionally, at the first level, baked in logistics into that. That's things like vehicle breakdown on your enemy, vehicle recovery, the return of walking wounded to bring units back up to strength, low ammo. If your unit fires and you have the low ammo event card, you play it on him, and that unit is now running out of ammo. Resupply in the same way. So the logistics in that short 2 or 3 hour battlefield time period is really handled at the first layer with those event cards, along with a lot of other events that can happen. That's one aspect of the event cards, is kind of baking in some of that battlefield logistics in there for during the battle type of stuff. The other thing that that I didn't realize till we really started playtesting a lot is the operations points. Particularly when you talk about artillery logistics and artillery fires. If you get to pre-plan some targets, like you normally would if you were a battalion, you have some pre-planned targets, TRPs out there, and as long as you're shooting artillery at those, they don't cost your staff any bandwidth. You get to do that for free. But as soon as you start firing outside of those pre-planned targets, it costs operations points. Those are the same operations points that you use to change your formation commands and use to buy assets. So you can very quickly start to burn through those operation points shooting artillery missions or indirect fire missions at targets that you hadn't planned. And when those start to go down, not only have you kind of maxed out your staff at being able to clear and conduct unplanned fires, that's where you're starting to get into some of the artillery logistics that you can't shoot everything all the time, and you start to run out of the ability to fire continuously with the artillery. So there's a couple of subtle ways that I think that we've tried to include some of that really during the battle logistics into decisive action.
I like calling it sneaky, but subtle. I'll take subtle. I'll take subtle. Um, I'm gonna even use another term. It's kind of slick how you guys do that, because the bad things may happen, which every commander always thinks about as they develop their plan of action. Um, it's a big part of planning, where what happens if. But the game puts it in a subtle way, and I love the chaos part of some of the card drawers. You can tell I'm from New York. That this is kind of how it is. Best laid plans, and I kind of I kind of like that. There's like all these little things, and then the decision making in the game. I think the game has very broad decision making, where you really have to sit and think, and you're kind of going through these little OODA loops throughout the game, and I found that interesting. The other one is it's a low counter density game. Um, to me, that's how it looks, having not seen, because I know, other than what Joe ran, it looks like it's not a ton of counters where I'm setting up the Western Front in 1917.
You will not knock stacks over. That's not a
No,
problem.
that was intent. But I will say, when you have your battalion deployed, your U.S. battalion deployed, the Russians are conducting a brigade attack with 3 battalions at you. The map can get a little crowded, depending how quickly you kill all those Russians. So in that one scenario, the Russian brigade attack, you're going to get the full Monty on that one for sure.
Yeah,
But
and the maps look great. I don't know if what Evan had was concept art, but like looking at some of the stuff that's in the playtest folder, the game does not lack for beautiful aesthetics.
oh, thanks. That's all my production. My vision of it. We actually, I don't know if we can say anything, Evan. You may not know. We have an artist assigned now that should be taking that stuff. I'd like to call it my 1970s SPI version type maps and convert them into something that I think is going to look really cool. I don't know if we can talk about that, Evan.
I think I guess what specifically do you want to talk about? I don't know. Have you talked to the artist at all?
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come out in the next month or so, and hopefully, people will look at his artwork. But we have an artist assigned that's, I think his first task is to take the maps and give them some professional work over. So hopefully they'll look great, and I'm excited based on some of the other work that he's done.
Yeah, so the maps I think go right to the multiple. It's maps. I know when the game first came out on the P500 that it was Hohenfels and it was NTC.
Those are the two. Yeah, those are the two. Having eaten dirt in those locations and one for 2 years, I wanted to include those because those are places that, at least for the U.S. Army standpoint, they fight every day.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to include those for that reason. The other 2 maps that we have are the Saluki Gap. It's actually taken from real terrain just north of the Polish border. There's kind of a secondary avenue of approach from Belarus to Kaliningrad. That's just north of the border in Lithuania, and I took a good battalion size operating area chunk of that and turned it into a map. That's kind of an open hilly map, I think. Is that a good description of it, Evan? The Hohenfels
Yeah,
map.
The Hohenfels map or the Suwalki Gap map?
The Suwalki Gap
Suwalki
one,
Gap.
Yeah. That one's pretty. Yeah, exactly. That's probably the most open. It's got its hills, but it's got the fastest moving because it doesn't have the desert terrain.
Right. Yeah. The other map is a very open Syrian map. That is wide open, but it's desert terrain, so there's movements. It's not as fast, but it's very open. That was kind of a composite of an area I took in Syria. Potential places as well as the NTC, if you're familiar with that, the Brown Devon Gap area, and then Hohenfels, which is a German wooded wooded area with very constricted, fire lanes and those kinds of things. So you've got some different variety in the maps. All of them rural world locations for the most part, and a couple of training areas, a couple of hypothetical locations, and we'll see what we can continue to build on from there. In fact, I'm trying to find a map of 29 Palms for maybe a next game, but we'll work on that once this one gets published.
Well, I had some requests, but I still remember during NATO exercise, I got to go out to Swaki Gap, and the Army guy that was with us, and I think he was, in the 5 shop, was like, this place is just waiting for a battle. And I'm like, yeah, because you're in the Army, and this is like, you dream about this all the time. And he's like, no, it just has all the perfect. No, it's, yeah, I understand, man. It's, I called it to his face Army porn. And, but it is. It's like, yeah, this is where one would fight a battle. I found that whole conversation I had with that cat really interesting. I think he's still out there waiting for something to happen, and that was a good long time ago, very long time ago. But yeah, when it first came out, I noticed it was really just the training maps. Thank you for not putting ARTC. I've been there, and I just, when I said that, I swatted a mosquito. Yeah, Fort Polk, Louisiana. I know they changed the name, but I don't know the new name. But looking at the 4 different maps, you guys are covering a ton of scenarios, which I think is also pretty cool. And the other thing I noticed with every game that uses these scenarios, I am sure that you're going to get a ton of user scenarios coming out there as well, because it's looking at the TO&E of a Russian. Actually, it's a little bit bigger than a BTG, I think. Your
Right.
counters, and then looking at the U.S. where you could do a mech or armored battalion. That's it. If you want to do the battalion fight, I'm trying to think of what you don't have that you need within the counter mix. I don't think there's anything.
In this one, no, I hope not. I hope we've kind of covered everything in there. And like I said, I don't know where we're at in time. Looking forward. I mean, I've got right here next to me. I've got the order of battle for an enhanced forward battle group. NATO has composite battalions that they have deployed forward. I think in
Yeah.
Poland, Lithuania, all of them. And I've got the OB for one that's a Canadian battalion headquarters. It's got a Canadian mech company. It's got a Spanish mech company. It's got a Polish armor company. It's got, if I could put, if I get the chance to continue this and put that together like a supplement or something like that, says, okay, here's your NATO battalion that you can fight instead of the U.S. Army battalion. I would be really excited to be able to do that.
Do you think you would change the cards, the enablers in the game with a NATO battalion
Yes.
or the style?
Yeah, thinking that way. I've got to delve into it a little bit more. And luckily I have access to some folks and talk to them about, in the U.S. Army, it's easy for me based on experience and the TTP and doctrine that they all have published to say, okay, this is, traveling Overwatch, bounding Overwatch. I can translate those into the missions that become the formation cards that allow you to do that. In NATO, what does a Canadian battalion commander tell his Spanish company when he wants them to go and move? This is your mission.
Oh, bah. That's Spanish
Yeah.
for go. Yeah, or something like that.
Or Spanish company. So so to me, that's the fun part of designing. Is I'll go figure that out, and I'll come up with a solution, and we'll implement it. And if we get to that point where we can do some more, the same thing, and really a second game I'm looking at is a Marine battalion landing team, probably augmented with an Australian company.
Yeah, I don't know where you would get the ConOps for that.
Yeah.
Actually, it's on my list of something we'll talk afterwards. People hate that when we say, what did they talk about afterwards? And you know what I usually tell people? Well, we talk about you. And they're like, I knew it. You say bad things about me. I go, yeah, because you don't you don't you don't like any die that's not a D6, of course. So no, people actually believe that sometimes. I'm excited for the game to come out. Um, and there's it's different. And you talk about GMT. Remember that message they had a few years ago? We're going to kind of do away. We're going to like go in a different direction. They haven't put out too many hex encounter games, but there's still such an appetite for it. And I think we were in a period for a while. Well, let's be honest, guys. Games are just getting better, and I think it's because designers, developers are willing to take those risks, which makes us in the hobby, those who love to play, it's excellent for us. Um,
Yeah, I
but
agree. The hobby's still evolving. The mechanics that are coming into games are still evolving in a lot of respects, which is awesome.
yeah, and everybody thought it was going to be like Euro games, and I hate area move. Um, you know, there's love Kevin Bertram. He's lives close by. He hates hexes on maps. Matter of fact, Bill, that you met, Evan. You remember the guy that did the Bella Wood game?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I hope you told Joe about that game. I don't like hexes, so I call him a tessellation bigot. And it's like, why'd you call him a tessellation? Because yeah, he's a tessellation bigot. Most people don't know what tessellation is, but hexes are a good example of it. But yeah,
They
I
also
mean,
don't
there's
know what stochasticity is either.
yeah. I mean, it's who won this whole podcast? The inventors of Scrabble. I mean, it's
We've had some $4 words on this podcast, that's for sure.
yeah. It's and people know I never know what I'm talking about, but it seems like this design kind of is. It's a new way of doing what a lot of people thought was old and stale, which I find interesting. And like the thing that what scared me at first was these guys have a folder of documents that they use for reference, and I thought I accidentally went into the General Command and Staff College's library page, which I have access to somewhere, and I'm like, no, you got all this stuff here, and I'm like, oh no, it is theirs. But you could see that you guys put in all the work to give that experience without killing your players, which, as a player, of course, thank you very much. But I am totally excited about this game. Now, it's hit P500. Um, it's When's it coming out?
I think as soon as we get the artwork and the layout done, Evan could correct me, but I think I'm pretty happy with where we're at with the design in the game. I think as far as that goes, it's ready to go. We've kind of I played a great game the other day, and I think I took out of playing for 2 days the big Russian brigade attack with Matt Kelly. I think I took like 2 or 3 notes of, oh, I need to fix this value on this card, and so there's some corrections, but there's no changes that we're really seeing in anything that we're getting from playtesters at this point. So if we can just get the artwork done, I'm hoping that GMT, I think maybe can get it done by 2025, depending on how long it takes
Uh,
to get the artwork done.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to get on the phone with Harold and the guys right after to try to get it out there. And one thing I'm going to thank you for, besides coming on the podcast, is that what I noticed because of the slow production times, um, trying to get the artwork laid out and everything else, that it seems like you guys are not over baking the game. I've seen so many games that it's good. Let's get the artwork done. Let's do the dev stuff. And as they're going final on the artwork, which means they can't touch the map and the counters, the rules start expanding. Yeah, we thought of something else. And I'm like, games that have been overbaked, and you could tell when a game's totally overbaked. And sometime it is, as they say in flying, set it and forget it. And then work on all the other stuff, which the chrome of the game, which I think is so important, because you mentioned the game Tac Air, right? We could let Evan in on a small secret. Why did guys like to buy this game? Because the box looked cool as hell. Remember
Well,
that box?
that's not a secret. We've all done it.
Yeah, like, and it just looked different than every other game. I don't know who did the artwork for that, but it just looked great, and I'm like, yeah, I got to get this. And back then it was what? It was a lot of money. It was $24. I still remember paying $24 for it, The Complete Strategist. That was an expensive game back in the day. But you worked on Grand Tactical. I don't know how much my copy of Gold Junior's Sword cost, but because of that, I was only allowed to have one child.
Yeah, so that it's surprising that those are great games, and there is a ton in the box for what you get with them, and you pay for that. And I look at GMT and I'm thinking, wow, $65. That's what a deal for Decisive Action. Holy cow!
Yeah, and it's like we had Sean Drillinger on, and it's a card-based squad game. If you remember up front, he used a lot of up front. He wanted to kind of put that out there. And he goes, well, the game weighs 9 pounds. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But then again, like, my Gold Juno Sword game, for home protection, I just throw that at an intruder. And, the cops would be like, what? Wow, this guy does not look good. I go, well, I threw Grand Tactical Series Gold Juno Sword at him, and he goes, I don't know how he's still alive. So, it's the games are getting better. They're looking better, but it's always great to get those, hey, we're going to do some experimenting, was there ever a time that you were like, other than me and my friends, or my friends and I, no one's really going to play this game?
That's a question for Joe, because I came on well after the game was already past that stage.
No, I didn't think so, and I was really encouraged by the playtester feedback, particularly when I see a whole generation of MI officers being exposed to the game right now because they're using it in training, or instruction. And Matt's enthusiasm came back, and when Matt and I played at Consum World in July, we sat there for about a day and a half playing the Russian Brigade attack. And quite frankly, we were having a great time with it, just enjoying the game. And the amount of people we came by that sat and watched, and then after I had to break away for something else, sat with Matt and talked to him about it. I thought that there was a lot of enthusiasm for it, so I hope it continues. Like I said, my real hope is after Decisive Action, kind of like the whole Next War series, we can have some supplements. We can have a second game, PLA and Marine Corps, and just continue on till I get to that point where I can actually put a Fort Polk JRTC map in the game and play that one too.
No. All right, please, no. Yeah, because it's the only training center I spent time at, and no, not at all. Like, oh, guess you have to go in the box. Yeah, I'm not going back in that box. Well, if you're going to do an airdrop, I don't care where it lands. I'm staying here because there's an old shutdown Air Force base right near it. I go, I'm staying here, man. It's way too mosquito-y. I don't know, for some reason, it draws it all in, and the mud there is unlike any other mud in the world. The mud, you know what I'm talking about. It follows you.
I had 3
and
rotations there. Yeah.
and it's like, I don't remember crawling around on my hands and knees in the mud. Where the hell did all this mud come from? It's just the mud down there, and it's Yeah, thanks. My PTSD's back, boys. Thanks, I appreciate it. But yeah, I'm hey, look, it's an hour and 15. Uh, I, thank you guys so much for coming on. Um, I know that you can still get on the P500 for the game. That I think a lot of people go look at it and they're like, yeah, it's a little different. But I think this conversation should tell those out there this is a good game. It's different, and just like all those comments when they were like, "Well, this game's more realistic than that game," and I'm like, you know, something about war games and abstractions we have to get. But this game abstracts what it needs to, and it has the crunch where it needs to, and I'm excited for it. So, and Evan did promise me a copy, a signed copy, like years before it came out. So, I'm kidding you.
It'll be worth millions someday, no doubt.
Yeah, yeah, it's with the signature, but GMT website, I will put the link on it. I believe you can download the rules now for it. That it was posted, but I think they've always been posted as soon as the game went for sale, if I'm remembering correctly.
No, it's available for play testers, but because we don't have any layout yet, we haven't really made them available for the public, I don't think.
All right, well, you can't get my copy out of my cold dead hand, but I've read the rules. I think the game's interesting, and guys, thank you so much. And as you guys sign off, tell me the last game you played that you really started to dig, even though you probably have no time to play games.
I'll start. I had a great session of the Battalion Combat Series at Consum World, where we played Valley of Tears for several days, and then I even got a little bit of extra last Blitzkrieg in. Enjoyed that. That was the last one I really dug into.
I have Valley of Tears. One day I'll play it. What about you, my friend Evan?
Well, thank you, Mitch, for having us on. It's been a blast.
Yeah.
Man, this is gonna sound like again, man, like I'm buttering you up, but the last thing they really got me was actually the Turtle Commander. I won a copy in a raffle at Connections, and then I was like, I should open this up and check it out. And then
You want a
turned
copy
out,
at Connections, huh? I wonder how
yeah,
that happened. How did that
uh,
happen?
because somebody drew my name out of a hat. I can't imagine who that would have been and how that could have happened.
No, I believe it or not, that's why I had Julia pull. So Joe at Connections, I get donations. GMT's one of them, and we raffle off hobby games because one thing, Evan, it may have freaked you out. Not all the people there play them,
It's
and
disturbing, but true.
it is. It certainly is. And since I took that part of the conference over, I go, we have to change that. We have to change putting wargaming into military culture because it's making a resurgence, and we have to put hobby gaming into the culture of some of these people. And I'm sure you met a ton of academics, and they don't play the hobby games. And I think it's
Yeah,
whenever. Go ahead, sir.
I know you're wrapping up, but I would say it's
Yeah,
almost like professional reading.
yeah. It's a
You know,
lot if you do it.
if you want to be a professional, understanding and getting into gaming a little bit like this will make you a better professional.
Yeah, with that's what I tell my folks. How do I learn more about wargaming? And I go play a lot of games. Just how it is. And also, it's an amazing hobby. But I feel a little, when I talk people into a game, I swear I feel like a drug dealer, and not the good drug dealer with the heart of gold, like the real bad one. And it's like, how do you curse your friend and keep them poor for the rest of their lives? Hey, there's this game Warhammer you should get into. So, and I'll leave it at that. But guys, thank you so much. And of course, we're going to talk about you. Yep, you in particular when we get off. But check the game out. I want to have you guys back because I think there should be a follow-on to this game because I think folks are going to be out there and love it. So I'm going to turn it back to good old Sean in the studio, and we'll see you guys in our next podcast. Have a good night.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.